We'd like to talk up Texas A&M with Andrew Hattersley from Gig'em 247 Sports. The Aggies, of course, go to spring practice here in a few weeks. Hey, Andrew, what's going on?
Mark, how you doing? Yeah, good to catch up again with you and talk a little spring ball. It feels like the season just ended and we're back talking about spring ball. They announced Jimbo Fisher's SEC Media Day appearance today, so it feels like the season will be here before we even know it.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a while. Good to see you. We'll dive into it here. Why don't we start at the top? So Jimbo Fisher hires Bobby Petrino as his offensive coordinator. Now, nobody's going to question in any way Bobby Petrino's offensive accomplishments and acumen from his past career. But obviously, this makes for an intriguing hire just in regards to Bobby Petrino's colored past and also based on just these two guys. Bobby Petrino's obviously led programs all over the place, a couple head coaches working together.
No doubt. I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic. Obviously, being in those meeting rooms, I think would be a lot of fun to be a fly on the wall for some of those if they disagree on certain things. But I think there's a lot of people that once they kind of started to look at the hire, look at the fit, I think the strong personality kind of works well for what A&M needed. They needed somebody, I think, that if Jimbo Fisher tries to kind of meddle or get involved too much, you needed somebody with a strong personality that could say, hey, I've got this. I've been doing this for a long time and know what I'm doing. And I think Bobby Petrino is that type of guy that Jimbo Fisher also trusts and trusts his expertise. He trusts his knowledge. He, has a history of kind of hiring guys that he's gone against in the past and guys that he's really familiar with. It was that way with Steve Adazio. He went obviously against DJ Durkin, got to see him firsthand. And I think the same is kind of true with Bobby Petrino. It's a guy that he really respects, has high regard for. We haven't had a chance to really talk to him yet and get his perspective. There wasn't a signing day press conference for him to really talk about it, but we'll really get his thoughts in a couple weeks on what he kind of thinks. But it's a guy that he certainly trusts and is going to kind of turn the keys over to.
Jimbo Fisher in this program is in a intriguing situation right now because from the time that he was hired, he's given all this money. He's won a national championship. Everybody has confidence that he's going to win big at Texas A&M. Now, I'm not going to label a national championship or whatever you want to put on it, but just basically that they're going to be in the running for those type of honors, SEC championships. Despite maybe the records not being what a lot of people had anticipated, you still saw it building. The recruiting was phenomenal. The wins were at the 8 and 9 win total. Of course, they have a big 2020 season where they finish in the top 5 in the country. This is really the first time, thud, that there's been adversity. 5-win season, the 22 class scatters to a certain extent. You could probably put the numbers to it. That's at least what the optics are, but it's probably not anywhere close to what people make it out to be. I've kind of looked player by player as well, but this seems to be kind of an intriguing place. He hires a new offensive coordinator where this is the first kind of challenge adversity in the building of this program.
No, I think you're certainly right. And I think that, there's a intense desire and an intense passion, especially coming off being ranked in the top 10 last year. And then to not even make a bowl, to lose to Appalachian State, to lose 6 games in a row, just everything that kind of came, with that season left fans a lot of extremely frustrated because they'd kind of seen the same thing. They saw the number 1 class of all time, all the talent that was heading to campus, and then for it to just kind of implode, I think left fans pretty frustrated. Now, I do think there are some good signs this offseason. Obviously, hiring Bobby Petrino and turning the play calling duties over to him was one of the top questions that A&M fans had was, is Jimbo Fisher actually going to turn the play calling duties over to somebody and bring in help? And Bobby Petrino certainly answers that question. And I think fans were particularly encouraged with being able to poach a guy like Marco Blackwell from from Ole Miss and what he just did with Quinshon Junkins and Zach Evans. I think that was certainly something fans were excited about. But to your point, I think there's kind of the way Jimbo Fisher sees it, and there's the way fans see it. I think fans have some concerns, some depth wise concerns. Obviously, after losing all those guys from the portal to the portal, I think they were able to keep a lot of key pieces: Edgerrin Cooper, Evan Stewart, Moose Muhammad, Connor Wigman. Obviously, gives you optimism at the quarterback position. They still have Amari Daniels, Lavian Moss. Getting back Anai Smith was a big deal. Bringing back a lot of guys along the offensive line. I think there's optimism having so many guys that played last year and having them all come back for another season and have a lot of those returning pieces back, but it's got to translate into wins. And I think that's kind of where the fan base sits right now, is regardless of where the team is ranked in the preseason poll, regardless of what the rankings say or anything like that, fans just want to see that start to translate into wins. And I think, when you talk to prospects on the recruiting trail, a lot of them have brought up, the massive amount of injuries that A&M suffered last year. They've all been part of a team. They've all seen situations where a season goes sideways for one reason or another. And so, I think there have been a lot of people that, at least on the recruiting trail, have pointed to, the amount of young players that A&M played, the injuries that they had. And so, but I don't think you get to use that recruiting pitch a second time. Now recruits want to see that step forward. You kind of get that one time, get out of jail free card and wait and see mode. But recruits want to see results as well. Recruits want to see kids get developed. They want to see kids go to the NFL and know that if they go there, they'll have a chance to compete for everything that they want to be able to compete for. Otherwise, they'll go somewhere else. And so, from a recruiting standpoint, I do think the pressure's on a little bit. I think from the fans, the pressure's certainly on. They weren't happy at all after last season. And that frustration, that anger is just going to linger until the fall, right? And until A&M has a chance to see games. Obviously, you can show signs during the spring, but until things hit the fall and until fans could see this team back on the field, I think they'll continue to be kind of that wait and see mode about, we want to see this team actually develop. And so, I think the program's in an interesting spot. I think you put it exactly right, is, I think there's still a ton of talent on campus, and some of those guys who left, some had dealt with injuries, some had seen that honestly younger players had passed them on the depth chart, and that's understandable, and that's a chance for them to go somewhere else and be able to play. That's what the transfer portal was really made for. And so, when you do play a lot of young players like Evan Stewart and some of the options at tight end, I think they guys behind them kind of see the writing of the wall on the wall of, okay, well, if I want to be able to play somewhere, I got to be able to go elsewhere. And then there was all the locker room dysfunction as well. And for the most part, those guys are all out.
It is a good point that you bring up about players relating to the recruiting and what the team's going through, more so than a fan base that just says, you're making a lot of money, you won a national championship before, everything should be perfect. You should be able to knock out 9 or 10 wins like it's nothing. Whereas relating to a recruit who's played on various teams, they can probably go back and think, okay, yeah, 2 years ago, we thought we had a great team, but we had 4 or 5 guys get hurt. And that doesn't mean we thought that our coach was no good. We still believed in our coach. We still believed in our position coaches, but just things didn't work out that particular season. And that's maybe a much more relatable story.
No doubt. And you have a lot of recruits too that kind of see themselves as the missing piece, right? They see themselves as I'm the guy that can come in and I'll be the one that turns it around, or I'll be the one that can come in and make an instant impact. I do think when you look at, as it could have been, I think it could have been worse had A&M not beaten LSU. I think that win at the end of the season, though they went 5-7, that was at least something that they could go out on the recruiting trail and say, hey, this is the last game we played. we were able to put it together, and this is what we were able to do. And that probably helped them be able to hold on to a guy like Javon Thomas, who late in the cycle said, hey, listen, I know A&M has been close, because they were close in a lot of those games and just couldn't quite, a lot of them were one-score games in the fourth quarter, or at least had a chance. And a lot of recruits' feedback was, I just want to see them get over the hump. I want to see them be able to put a complete game together and be able to finish a game off. And so, there was guys, David Hicks sort of said the same thing about the injuries and everything else going on with the locker room. And so, it's something that myself and Brian kind of talk about on the board a lot is, recruits see things differently than fans do. Fans are going to see things and be frustrated and demand better, but recruits sometimes see things differently as well.
It's one thing to say, hey, 5-7 didn't work out, but to show, okay, this is what this team's capable of doing when they get it together. And so proof of concept for this particular night was LSU was playing for a possible college football playoff appearance. They were headed to the SEC championship game already, and we put it together, and we knocked off a team that won 10 games and finished close to the top 10 in the country.
Yep, exactly. And then you'd be able to say, I brought a lot of those guys back, and now it's about taking that next step. If they come out and stumble out of the gates again, it's going to be a struggle to recruit. But I think that at least gave recruits optimism and the belief that was the sign of what was to come in years to come.
And before Bobby Petrino can really go into the lab and do what he likes to do best and work the X's and O's in the matchups, of course, he's been called upon, along with everybody else, to hit the recruiting trail. And you've been fairly impressed with what he's done thus far.
Yeah, no doubt. I think people are still trying to get a feel for what he really likes as a prospect. He's been known as somebody that kind of likes those big bruising backs, and you've certainly seen some offers go out in that extent. But the early reviews have been really good. And one of the pieces of feedback when he was hired was a lot of people said, hey, not regarded as a guy that loves to recruit, but he'll know how to come in and call plays and run an offense. And, A&M had 2 junior days in January, and he was very involved with both of them. He's already been out to see A&M's cornerback signee, Marcel Reed, on a couple of occasions as well. Out in Mississippi. And then, when you talk to kids around the junior day, one Tiger Ryden, for example, is a 2025 running back, said, hey, he had breakfast with me, and we had a chance to really talk and get to know each other, and didn't talk like a ton of schemes or anything like that, but really had a chance to get to know him on a personal level. And Comby Branham, who I was talking to last week, was another lineman that was in town that got the offer from Bobby Petrino, and said sort of the same thing. Hey, Bobby Petrino was around the entire time I was on my visit and really made me feel welcome. We got to talk a lot. And so, I think people were pleasantly surprised about that. And there's actually been some people that have noted on our stories, hey, Bobby Petrino's name seems to be getting brought up quite a bit. And so I think he's made a positive impression. He's been out there at the forefront and, working alongside Jimbo Fisher, who's obviously a very, very good recruiter. But I think he's been able to connect with a lot of people. The Anthony Maddox one was interesting, and that's a guy that, it kind of depends who you talk to and on what sort of comparison you get. But the comparison that Bobby Petrino had for AJ Maddox was Lamar Jackson, and that's obviously very, very high praise from a guy that, Bobby Petrino coached to a Heisman Trophy while he was at Louisville. But A&M was kind of figuring out the board on where they were going to go at the quarterback position. Aaron Noland is a guy that they brought in for a multi-day visit. They brought in Davi Balford for a visit, another quarterback out of Florida. Brought in, had talked to Walker White, who's now committed to Auburn, and really zeroed in on AJ Maddox. And I was told that Bobby Petrino was a key part of that, on kind of getting the deal done. They love him. They think his ceiling is really high, and wanted to get him in the class, and he was definitely ready to do that.
Talking up the Aggies, we've got Andrew Hattersley in the line from Gig'em 247 Sports. Check out Andrew and the rest of the staff there at Gig'em 247. Texas A&M going to camp here in the next few weeks. Staying in the recruiting side of things, what is your early returns on 24, which we're a long ways away, of course, from December. There's only 4 hard commits, but in regards to what offers are out there, what are the big storylines and narratives right now?
Yeah, so I think obviously coming off of the last cycle, I think they kind of hit some bumps in the road at times. They had a rough summer. They were able to close strong with a couple flips. Micah Tees, Jaden Platt, Raymond Cottrell, Marcel Reed. They were really able to do a lot of their work late in the cycle. And then once January came around, they really turned their focus towards 2024 and hitting the ground running there. They've obviously got 4 commits. They've got AJ Maddox, they've got Ashton Funk, Dylan Evans, and DeBron Gatling, and all 4 were in town during the junior days. They, I think, are off to a good start. I think one of the biggest priorities for them in this cycle is offensive line, specifically offensive tackle. I think they need to kind of reload that room, and they've got a lot of targets there that they were able to get on campus in January. Obviously, Ashton Funk is a guy that many believe will be a highly rated tackle by the time he arrives at A&M this time next year. They brought in Bennett Warren. They brought in Arai Williams, who is the cousin of now A&M freshman Ruben Owens. So there's certainly some family ties there. I think that could end up being an in-state battle between Texas and Texas A&M. Bennett Warren is another one. Blake Ivy's another highly rated offensive lineman. And, Kobe Branham's a guy that they see more on the interior. But I think they've targeted a lot of guys. They've given themselves a lot of options to potentially maybe get three guys in this cycle. And then linebackers, the other pivotal one that they really have to sign. Obviously, and they have to have a strong cycle. I think they're gaining ground and getting some traction with LSU linebacker commit Xavier Atkins. I talked to him over the weekend out at a 7-on-7 tournament. He just moved to Humble Summer Creek, and he talked about, when he went over to A&M for a junior day experience, that they really made him feel welcome. It was Jimbo Fisher was there, DJ Durkin was there, Alec Garwig, David Bowen. They just had the whole recruiting staff kind of in sync and making him feel like priority. And he said, listen, A&M is going to be a factor all the way until signing day. And so I think that's certainly encouraging. They're battling it out for Peyton Pierce and Ty Anthony Smith are a couple other big targets along the at the linebacker spot. I think they really have to, because that was one when they lost Anthony Hill last cycle, filled it in with Torian York and Chance Johnson. I'm a big fan of Torian York. I think he was really productive, but those are guys that you're going to have to develop for a couple of years. And it's 2 straight cycles that they've missed out on a 5-star linebacker that they had committed. So I think this is a really important cycle for them to be able to land a couple difference makers at that spot. Obviously, I think Damian Sanford is another guy from the 2023 cycle I think could end up being good. But linebacker and offense, I think, are 2 of the biggest ones. And then when you look at receiver, they're in on 2 of the top receivers in the country, and Micah Hudson and Ryan Wingo. Obviously got DeBron Gatling committed already. Draylon Miller is one of the top receivers in the country that they're in the mix for, so that are in the mix for a lot of guys. And they were in the mix for a lot last year as well. And now it's just a matter of, can they kind of get that momentum? Can they get that traction? And can they start to close out some of these recruitments heading into the summer?
Hey, Andrew, just touching upon the 2023 class that ranked 12th in the nation according to 247 Sports, 19 hard commits, 10 of them are on campus. And with the ridiculous expectations of really anybody in the SEC West and everybody that they're competing against, the 12th ranked class should be celebrated. But at the same time, in comparison to Alabama, LSU, Georgia, there's obviously a gap there, at least from a metrics or number standpoint. Still, they had a big win with David Hicks. They took him away from Oklahoma and everybody else. And in addition to that, they still come out with the 12th rated class. So all things considered, there's obviously still a ton of talent in that class. And how do you assess how they finished?
Yes, I think obviously expectations were kind of sky high, like you mentioned, off that top rated class of all time. And I think there were certainly some big wins there and some guys that can be difference makers, and then some other parts of the class that kind of feel like question marks. Starting with the positives, obviously you mentioned David Hicks. I think that was one of the biggest wins of the cycle, to not only get him committed over Oregon and Oklahoma, but then to be able to hold on to him despite going 5-7. Oklahoma was kind of making a late push there. Oregon was making a late push as well. So to avoid any drama and be able to keep him in the fold and have him locked in heading into the early signing period was really big. And then Ruben Owens, I think, is another huge one. He was a guy that, even when he committed to Louisville, I kind of felt like at some point A&M was going to make a run again. They were going to be able to kind of get him on campus for a visit and make their push. And he didn't end up making it in town for a game, but he was one of the first guys that Jimbo Fisher went and saw once the contact period opened, and spent an entire day with him, which really meant a lot to Ruben Owens. The Louisville coaching change happens. I think it probably would have happened anyway, but A&M was in position to pounce there and get a guy, especially with Devon Achane heading off to the NFL. I think that's huge to be able to get a guy like Ruben Owens. Give Bobby Petrino, he's going to have a lot of weapons to work with. Probably the best group of offensive talent that he's ever had the chance to work with, and I think Ruben Owens is certainly part of that. We're able to hold off pushes for a couple other guys too. Javon Thomas was really touch and go there for about the last week. TCU had a ton of confidence. Obviously, they had quite a bit of momentum in December with their college football playoff push, and they really felt like in the last week that they were going to be able to flip Javon Thomas. And so for A&M to hold on to him, hold on to the offensive line group that they had, I think those were the strong points. And Marcel Reed, let's give them credit for being able to get a guy like him. They were searching a lot of the cycle for a quarterback, and they tried for Austin Novosad, they tried for Jaden Rashada, Dante Moore, and then we're able to get off a late flip of Marcel Reed, and the same goes at the wide receiver position. In the final month before signing day, they didn't have any skill position players signed or even committed for that matter, and then you're able to get Ruben Owens in the fold. You're able to get Micah Tease. You're able to get Raymond Cottrell and Jaden Platt, all as late flips. Not bad. Probably you don't want to rely on flips and being able to pluck guys away from other schools every cycle, but they stayed with it and were able to add those guys to the class. Now, as I mentioned, I think the biggest question mark is at the linebacker spot, and that starts with losing Anthony Hill. That was a massive blow at a position of need, and probably one of the better players I've ever covered. I mean, he is just an absolute game wrecker, a monster, every word that you could describe. And so, I don't think it's possible to find a guy that could fill that void. Once he decommitted, once he went to Texas, that's just a blow that, you're not going to be able to find a guy that's able to match up to him. I do think that Torian York is a nice late add. A guy that was committed to Baylor, had Duke after him as well late in the cycle, was incredibly productive at Temple, and it was just a matter of the measurables kind of got him, right? The measurables were, colleges looked at it and were kind of hesitant on that front, but was a guy that had 100+ tackles, as a senior and a junior and a multi-year starter. And then Chance Johnson, I think, is going to need some development as a guy that's a little bit new to the linebacker position. And, and Damian Sanford, I think, was an underrated pickup as well. But I think the linebacker spot's going to be the one that people kind of look at this class and keep an eye on.
Andrew Hattersley, Gig'em 247 Sports. Get on over there, check out Andrew's work. Of course, we appreciate Andrew stopping by. Please like the video, share the videos out on social media, subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. Andrew, thanks so much for stopping by. We will have you back here soon, hopefully, to talk some offense and defense.
Absolutely. Always appreciate it. I'm around anytime.